Do you know how big Saturday, October 9th, 2021 is going to be? It is the circle date. Every year, you start looking in your preseason magazines and your helmet grid schedules, and you're trying to find that Saturday. Well, week 1 is great now, but this Saturday, October 9th, that's the one. If you need to carve it out, go ahead and carve it out. Block it off. Let your friends know. Let your family know. Check the wedding calendar. If someone is inexplicably being married on Saturday, October 9th, even if they're on the other end of this production currently emanating from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, even if they're associated with the show. Yes, you just got to distance yourself from those folks for October 9th. Now, you can make peace on the following Monday, but why am I talking about October 9th like this? Well, if we want to split the bill on Saturday, October 9th, to let you know how big this Saturday is, I'm going to show you the undercard, and then I'm going to show you the main events. The undercard would make, in and of itself, a very good Saturday. On the undercard, let's start with Georgia at Auburn, which is one of the biggest games in the SEC. It's already, for Brian Harsin, the third underdog spot on the schedule. They will have gone to Penn State. They will have gone to LSU. Well, then they got Georgia coming in there. I don't even think they've taken the bye week yet. So already a third really tough spot for them. It's also going to be the toughest true road test for Georgia all year. They've got Florida and Clemson neutral, and so they go to Auburn, and they're going to be a sizable favorite there, maybe even a double-digit favorite, which is rare, very rare in that rivalry. But JT Daniels on the road under some hostile environment situation. Let's just see how he performs there. Next up, Michigan at Nebraska. It could be a season turner for Scott Frost. I mean, that's one that I know internally up there. They circle all the time when they play that game, but that's one that's located on a specific portion of the schedule for Nebraska to where it could be, in some fans' minds, do or die time already. But for Michigan, too, this is the second leg of a back-to-back road spot. They go to Wisconsin, and then they go to Nebraska. And so where's Jim Harbaugh there? Because remember, they've already had Washington come in the first portion of the season. And that's week 2, I believe. And then they've got a trip to Wisconsin. They go to Nebraska. When you start talking about potential losable games there, well, that's also the territory that we enter for Michigan. How about Notre Dame at Virginia Tech? That is a third straight opponent for Notre Dame that's coming off a bye. And I think they have 6 total. There are 6 opponents in a span of 7 games that are coming off byes when they play Notre Dame. This is the third in a row. Yeah. So Notre Dame, third straight opponent off a bye. Also, I'm very interested for that week 1 game, North Carolina at Virginia Tech. If North Carolina wins that, so be it, the chalk held. But if Virginia Tech were to win that, how different does this game look, this Notre Dame at Virginia Tech game? Next up is LSU at Kentucky. Now, you may look at this one and you say, what's the big deal with Kentucky? Well, it's not in and of itself a big deal. Kentucky's not going to be sitting there in the top 10 in all likelihood, but LSU could very well be a national factor by this point. Fan base certainly thinks they will be. And it's a schedule dynamic game. So LSU, don't just look at this game in a vacuum. Look at the week before, look at the week after. They do the LSU Tigers the week before Auburn, and then they go to Kentucky, and then they've got Florida the week after. Kentucky's got this weird string of games where the schedule dynamic comes into play every single week. We continue. Florida State plays North Carolina on this day. So again, we use the context of week 1 to frame up a potential game in week 6. Florida State plays Notre Dame in week 1. Notre Dame's like a 10, 11-point favorite. You expect the Irish to win. But just for argument's sake, if Mackenzie Milton is a lot more than a lot of you expect him to be, and maybe that Florida State team takes some quantum leap year 1 to year 2, or let's just say Notre Dame's not quite up to the par you expect them to be, and Florida State wins, well, they go off the radar for a little while. They play some games that aren't going to be on the national marquee, and then they reappear here in week 6. And this is a crucial 2-game stretch for North Carolina. They're playing Florida State, and then they're playing Miami the next week. Miami's got this day off, by the way. So you got that one. You got Arkansas at Ole Miss. Arkansas stretch at this point versus A&M, neutral site, at Georgia, and then at Ole Miss. So they're on the road 3 consecutive weeks, which should be illegal, especially in the Southeastern Conference, but I digress. Ole Miss is coming off a game at Alabama. So if the Rebels are surprise contenders at this point, and they could be that even with a loss to Alabama, very dangerous, very tricky spot there. And I put South Carolina at Tennessee only because those are 2 first-year coaches, and these are 2 programs that when you mention one to the other in the SEC East, they both are very quick to say, oh, they're not ahead of us. But both programs think it, and so both can't be right, and they're both in year 1 of a staff there. So those are interesting in and of themselves. But that's not the main event slate. That's just the undercard. Then we shift to the main event, and it gets really juicy. Those games I just mentioned are on the same day as Alabama plays Texas A&M, as Oklahoma plays Texas, as Penn State goes to Iowa, as Utah goes to USC. So you see some of the notables for each of these games if you're watching on YouTube right now. That Alabama-Texas A&M game is the late kickoff. It is not to be confused with late kick, of course, but it is an 8 p.m. Eastern showdown out there in College Station, and that's going to be one of the most raucous environments you could ever imagine. Both teams, now if you just go purely in terms of point spread, both teams will be favored to be undefeated at that point. And it's been 3 years now where Jimbo Fisher's taken on Nick Saban. In 3 years, they've been handled. This is the year they feel like physically they can match up. And also, you've got a lot of newness with Alabama. Quarterback, offensive line, wide receiver, offensive coordinator, you know all that. Running back. Having said that, they're loaded. But they go in there, and it's a situation I'm very curious. In fact, I'm curious with Alabama earlier than this if that offense is going to just go out on the road and hum along like it's supposed to, even with all those new parts, because this is not Xbox world. This is not fantasy world. It's real life. Real human beings have to execute that, and it's a lot easier said than done. Earlier that day, I would imagine the noon kickoff, we could try and do a twofer here, being out on the road. Oklahoma, Texas, and Dallas, equally as curious. I mean, the headlines write themselves, but I'm equally as curious for this one at the weeks before and the week after. So you got Red River here in week 6. But Oklahoma the week before goes to Kansas State. They're trying to avoid 3 consecutive losses to the Wildcats. And then the week after they play TCU. Texas is at TCU the week before this game. And then they got Oklahoma State the following week. And that will be a rested Oklahoma State. So it's a 3-week stretch for both teams that will not make or break their season. But if you're talking playoff picture, that's very much in play here. And that's very much a 3-game stretch that could define your playoff fate. Penn State at Iowa, the potential record swings here alone are fascinating to think about. You could, of course, have 2 undefeated teams. And that would be a marquee Big Ten game at that point in week 6. But also, if you think about which team plays who before they play each other, there are multiple potential losses here. Give you an example. Penn State, they open at Wisconsin. They've also got Auburn at home in week 2. They will have already played Indiana at home. Likewise, Iowa will have played Indiana at home. They go to Iowa State in week 2, and then they go to Maryland the week before they play this game. So there are several losable games, but neither are insurmountable. They'll be favored in some of those. That Penn State-Iowa game is going to be a huge, huge game in the Big Ten. And then the game that probably decides the Pac-12 South is I would imagine, late night game. I would imagine. These kickoff times have not been announced. How about Utah at USC? You could have the Pac-12 South on the line. Southern Cal has a very favorable schedule everywhere but this game. I want to say Utah's off the week before. And so there will be no schedule dynamic in favor of Southern Cal. It is at the Coliseum. But other than that, game on here. And if Utah wins that, of course, you got the game-and-a-half lead in the division. If I had to pick the Pac-12 right now, which I'm not, but if I picked the division winner for the South, I would lean Utah at the moment. That's where my mind is at the moment. And so this day, Saturday, October 9th, I feel like a carnival barker, Colin, but this is the day. If you want to introduce a buddy or a girlfriend to college football, if you got to get away one Saturday, if there is a drop-dead date, you just cordon it off and you go disappear in the woods and you watch it on your, I don't know, whatever device you want to take out there. This is the day, Saturday, October 9th. We will know a whole lot by the time the dust settles on that date.